We just released the Fox News power rankings, and it shows a pretty tight race. We talked about the Senate races today. It does look like Republicans, just because the way the map is set up, will take the majority, perhaps getting up to 54 seats. The best case scenario for Democrats looks like a tied Senate 50-50 with whoever the vice president is, settling those ties. So that was our take. President Trump looks to still be in the lead slightly in some of the battleground states, not all necessarily. Kamala Harris is gaining. And I'd just love to get your take on where do you think things are today?
Yeah, I think that is all a good place to start. And you mentioned the Senate first, and because that's my background a little bit on the campaign side. I think that's correct in terms of the floor for Republicans and the ceiling for Democrats, in the sense that even if Harris has a really good night, it's very hard to see them doing any better than the 50 that we sort of, that's kind of where we keep it right now, because the Democrats have 51. They give back the one in West Virginia. That's just a gimme. It's a pickup for Jim Justice, the governor there. Which is to say, if Trump wins, that's enough for a majority for Republicans. Trying to keep Montana and Ohio is going to be difficult in any event. I do think even a joyful ticket of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, which might help them in a lot of places, that doesn't help in Montana. That doesn't help in Ohio. In some ways, it actually, syncs it up more with the top of the ticket than you could imagine, perhaps with Biden. That's going to be really tough to hold. And I think while 54 might be a lot, that would take a really good night from Donald Trump. I think it's easy to see Republicans get 51, 52. If they don't, it's a huge disappointment. That said, with this class in particular, Republicans have been snake bitten. And so you never know. But Sheehy in particular is pulling really well. Bernie Moreno in Ohio has a little bit tougher time, but they've kind of laid low. And I think the truth about the Senate map and the presidential in a lot of ways is the powder's very dry. And until Labor Day, I don't think they're really going to lean in on the paid media and really the sprint to the finish line. So Senate feels very good for Republicans. The House is going to be tied very much to the top of the ticket. The question of the presidential race is very much up in the air. And I think, I would have told you coming out of the swap, 3 weeks ago, it was a pure reset, that really Harris is just kind of looking like Biden did before the swoon, before the debate. I don't know that it's fair to characterize it that way anymore. Harris is looking strong. They are sort of untested. They are able to just kind of ride on the good vibes right now. That won't last forever. But remember, on an 85-day sprint at this point, they don't need it to last for long. And they're going to go in and out of news cycles that are favorable to them just by virtue of having a week of a big celebration there in Chicago, which looked at for a moment like that was going to be very rough for Democrats. So I think it's going to get worse for Republicans before it gets better. That said, this is still a 50-50 race by any measure. And I think in part because Republicans got so psyched out by 3 weeks of just everything was going their way. It's Republicans aren't used to having the refs on their side. You're not used to having the media sort of holding the other side to account. And I think got a little bit spoiled there. I think really, unfortunately, wasted 3 weeks that could have been used to hammer a message home against Kamala Harris, and instead kind of lick their wounds for a while in a way that's not helped them.
I know. I was thinking, I was like, get up off the mat. What's going on? But I also think the media, my goodness, guys. Finally, you saw today, like the Washington Post editorial board saying, Madam Vice President, you do actually have to take some questions. Here's some questions we would like to ask you. I call it the hiding in plain sight campaign. And then I see today that Time Magazine and The Atlantic both put Kamala Harris on the cover for this week. And I thought, guys, there's still 9 weeks until the election. Couldn't we put Simone Biles on the cover, or maybe, the U.S. Olympians, the whole team? Like America did so well in the Olympics, but it's almost as if the media is not even trying. And you and I've been in political communications for a long time. Like, I can't imagine as a spokesperson believing that something that I said that fundamentally changed my boss's position on an issue would be accepted. For example, if I said, "Oh no, I'm not against my Congressman Schaefer. He is no longer against fracking." Cool, and walk away. What do you
it's
think's happening there?
The credulity with which the media is taking those statements at face value. Okay, fair enough. I think that's just the nature of the game in some ways, and I think every Republican communications professional sort of would smirk knowingly at that. But I think it is up to Republicans to hammer home, not just appealing to the unfairness of it all, but to hit the message that she has been on this side of the issue for this long. And I think by appealing to fairness and trying to work the refs, okay, there's a value to that. You can fire up your side. But if you're not out there showing the clip, I mean, there was a moment there where I think, President Trump was out there at rallies kind of showing, clips of Kamala Harris. They can't ignore that, right? When you hammer that home. But there's been an inconsistency with that. I mean, we can talk all day about media bias and media unfairness, and it's true, but it's baked in, and we've always known that. That's
right. I always
new.
say that, like, Republicans, you start in a credibility deficit with the media just because you're a Republican, which means you could whine about it, or you can just recognize that and then work so much harder. I always say corporate America should hire Republican communicators because I guarantee they had to work so much harder than their Democrats. Now, the White House press corps, the current White House press team might disagree with that for the last month and a half they've had because of Biden. And certainly if you ask the Hillary Clinton team, they think the New York Times is the worst thing that ever happened to them. But overall, I think that you and I are correct.
But to your point, in terms of the last month and a half they had with Biden, if there were any lessons to be learned, it should have been that they should have been more curious earlier on. And so you've gone from very credulous and deferential to the administration to frenzy of the month or whatever it was as we sort of pushed Biden out. And then on the other end of this, we're back to this credulous, oh, that sounds nice, let's just print what they say sort of approach, which, look, I'm not surprised by it. It is frustrating as a Republican and for Republicans, but you have to drive the message and be relentless. Any opportunity you have for earned media when you're out there on the Sunday shows. I think J.D. Vance did a pretty good job.
He did. I thought he did. And it was sort of interesting because you said, like, they had 3 weeks where they could have done interviews and they didn't do it. But when Vance did interviews on 3 different Sunday shows yesterday, it was like, well, he answered the tough questions. He was there. He was calm, thoughtful. You might disagree with him, but at least he did it.
Exactly. And I think that was always, obviously he was picked for a different race. He was picked for a different moment in the campaign, but he's always going to give you the Trump take in an articulate way that Trump probably couldn't be able to stay on message and discipline. It is a good use case, and they should have been doing it sooner. And I expect them to do it throughout. But it's been frustrating to watch as a Republican, just as a professional, thinking, okay, guys, you got to be out there. And it's not as if the material is not there. I mean, within a day, you had campaigns, Senate campaigns, like for instance in Pennsylvania, like coming up with perfect spots that packaged these hits against Harris, and we just haven't seen it. And part of that, as I said, look, bombarding Harris in August when people are on vacation or watching the Olympics or what have you. I mean, I guess at some level, putting that on air on the Olympics has some logic to it. I saw some Harris Walls ads, but okay, it makes sense perhaps to train your fire until September when people really tune in. That said, this was such a key stretch for Harris to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and reboot herself that I think it's a real missed opportunity. You can't do anything about it now, but you really have to take these final 85 days seriously. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, that's for Election Day. But voting starts significantly sooner than that. So really, we're talking about 2 months before the real action begins.
Yes, I think that the Republicans are building up Kamala Harris's first media interview or first press conference to be way too much. Like, they assume it's going to be a disaster. It could be. If past is prologue, maybe it will be a disaster. But this is a woman who's shown she can rise to the occasion. And we also know that she'll probably pick a reporter or a journalist who is maybe gentle in terms of the questioning. Maybe not, but I just think that can't be the only thing that they're waiting on in order to go after her.
I think you're exactly right. And quite frankly, we have, this is sort of the counterfactual of not managing expectations very well with Joe Biden. And of course, it worked out fine insofar as when he had the disastrous debate that he did, it was undeniable to the point where it actually moved too quickly and knocked him out, right out of the gate. But I think in terms of, you have to manage those expectations, and you have to assume that the lower that you set the bar and the more that you build up the sort of tension, the easier it is to glide over it. And as you said, for the same reasons, if you don't trust the media to hold her account now, I don't know why you'd trust them to be the arbiters of whether she cleared that bar. So I do think there's a risk to building that up too much. It's important. They do need to start answering those questions and getting her off in unscripted moments, because the reason she was considered a top tier candidate in 2020 in that election cycle, the reason she was even picked to be vice president, she is good at set plays. She's not great in a position where she has to, do some extemporaneous speaking or speak to issues that she's not properly prepared for, or, if somebody snaps off a curveball. But as you said, as they ease into this, they will be given credit just for sitting down in the first place, just for giving media access in the first place.
And then you take away that point.